Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful day since morning. We've been listening to a lot of discussions on AI coming in, the communication space evolving. And one thing we were discussing as a panel before we came in here is that a lot has already been spoken about crisis communications already since morning. So what we've got to be very mindful of as a panelist, we'll be sticking to specific nuances which are fresh and new. And before we do that, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping and set the context here. One thing that's for sure that we've been listening so far since morning is crisis is essentially a time when the true test of a leader happens. A true communicator comes through and there's so much that you need to do on the go. Time is the biggest casualty in times of a crisis situation. Essentially, with AI and technology coming in, the virality aspect has completely replaced the validation and the verification, which is very, very important before we start acting in a crisis situation. And therefore, the need for changing the playbook, the nuances of the checkpoints and the guardrails which were around crisis management, that evolution needs to happen. But before we get into the solution and what and how and why of it, one thing that all of us agrees, it's all very, very new. So essentially, there are three things that I, as a moderator, would like to achieve with this panel is, first, let's just redefine and understand what has essentially changed in the crisis situations that we face today or the environment that we operate in. Number two, what will be important for us to address as a panel is, therefore, in this situation, what is it that we want to automate and what is it that we want to fiercely still protect and use human intelligence for. And with this context set, maybe we'll come to the playbook that needs to be rewritten, redefined. I would like to open this conversation maybe with you, Deepa, where we would love to hear from you, from your perspective, what's evolved in the crisis situation and in the environment in which we operate today.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a very pertinent question because, crisis has really, I think the definition has changed drastically from the times I think most of us started out as, comms and agency people. And I think I would classify it into 2-3 key buckets when I talk about, how it has changed. So one of the things is, the broader scope of crisis has, kind of changed. Earlier it used to be, product recalls or an accident or things like that. Today, I mean, when you look at it, crisis can be triggered by a lot of non-physical, events, data breach, data privacy issues, social media backlash. There could be algorithmic failures. A lot of these things are happening today. So from what it used to be and what it is now, I think the definition has changed drastically. Other than that, I think one of the key things which I think other people have also kind of touched upon is, faster escalation. So I think we have this borderless world now thanks to the proliferation of the internet and social media. And there's this 24/7 into 365 news cycle. I think that has led to, this epidemic in a way, I would say, where, crisis can just within seconds escalate. In any part of the world it would happen, but it would reach the other part of the world. So I think those two things are key. Other than that, I think stakeholder diversity is another thing that has changed. Earlier we would look at a crisis more, from a customer standpoint or, media standpoint. But today, I mean, if you look at it, there are the AI watchdogs. You look at it, there are influencers, investors, regulators, so that whole scope and, that whole stakeholder diversity has kind of changed hugely, I would say. Also, I think lastly, external and internal factors, external factors, of course, are always there, but I think today, because of the social media bit, I think employees have become so important in any crisis. I mean, we've always said this, that they are brand ambassadors, but they have to be mapped separately today. That was not the case earlier. Now there has to be an equal focus on employees. So I think I would classify it in these
Great. That's very interesting. The nature of crisis in itself is changing, and who we are talking to and what we are talking there for is changing. You want to build on that, Jasrita?
Yeah, I'd like to frame the big shifts that are happening. So I see it as 4 shifts in building on what Deepa just said. Earlier, you had concrete events. There's a service failure, there's a regulatory issue, there is an executive misconduct. But now, there is reputational risk even if there is synthetic content. And the algorithm plays on that. So there could be a viral deepfake, or there could be a misrepresentation which never happened. So your brand could be at risk even if the underlying event did not happen. That's the first shift for me. The second is the algorithm rewards outrage and novelty. So therefore, a brand can move from obscurity to global backlash in hours, right? And that's the point of speed that she was making. The third is who shaped the crises? The crises was shaped by consumers, activists, that set of stakeholders. But today, again, you have AI curating what we will see. You have AI working on, so there is manufactured outrage on top of the actual outrage. And without AI reaching to that level of evolution, which we're yet to see, it's very difficult to decipher how much of that is real and how much of that is manufactured. Lastly, I think the loss of narrative control. Earlier, you could manage a crisis through spokespersons and media statements, but now misinformation can outpace the verifiable information that comes out. And sadly, this information doesn't travel as well as misinformation does. Certain times, the crisis has peaked before the verifiable information is in and before the takedowns, legal takedowns can happen. So these are the 4 clear shifts that I see.
Very interesting, Jasrita. I think what I can make sense of here is it's becoming more faceless, more nameless, far more challenging to understand where the inception was from, and therefore where do I run and solve it for. So maybe that's a great Corp Comm perspective of how a client views in a situation like this. Coming in from an agency lens, Venkatesh, and then maybe Aman, how do you see the new vulnerabilities? And therefore, once we've established the vulnerabilities, how do we move towards solving for it? Because right now, as we are hearing, it's seeming that AI is more of a part of the challenge than the solution. So how do we pivot that and solve for it?
First of all, thank you. The agencies, typically, the way they are working. Hello, can you hear me? The agencies are, most of the times, involved in a crisis, especially after the break of the incident which happens, which is typically the mindset that we fare, okay? Having handled crisis for almost 20 years, I've seen one important change that has happened, that ever since, now AI is the new wave, but ever since the digital and social media has come up, the golden hour, which is the most critical part of any crisis management, has shrunk tremendously, okay? When the golden hour is shrunk, you anyway had so much more to deal with and so much to address. Add to this, another phenomena which is happening is that wherever the time taken for information to reach in terms of correct news or wrong news, which would be then handled through a statement, through a emotional angle, through a narrative. Now, even before you think of it, there are so many ways and means in which the narrative is being addressed, multiple narratives being set using possibly AI. But I would like to caution saying that though we are talking about AI in the crisis perspective, AI has not evolved to that extent where the communication industry has either completely understood it, has been able to use it, or even AI itself doesn't have all the answers what it can give us. Okay, today merely using a chat GPT or some memes is all that is being done. And I, for one, know that AI has been used more in mischief making, crisis creation than in crisis solution. Because in crisis solution, it is a completely different ball game. I can facelessly create videos and put it, post it, etc. So everything is changing, and agencies now need to again relearn the art of what is the kind of team structure they have, where they come in to handle the crisis. So while the other parts will be covered, saying that, okay, what is the message, what is the narrative, this is the biggest challenge.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Venkatesh. Coming to you, Aman, again, from an agency perspective, I think one thing that's clearly established is it is a challenge. It is genuinely an elephant in the room, which the earlier panel also discussed. We are still figuring out the head and tail of it. In an environment like this, how do we prepare and how do we, let's start coming to the mapping of it and coming to the playbook of it. Was there already a playbook that was actually applicable to all crises, first of all? And if there was one, then how are we seeing it evolve over a period of time?
I think I'll just put it like this. Playbooks, textbooks were always existing. I don't think they are well oiled. They are refreshed. Whenever there is a crisis that happens, it's a new crisis. That's why kind of those playbooks don't come to the picture. I think I'll give you an example again, like, it's a crisis turning into an opportunity. And also, I think as a consulting firm, as an agency, you are kind of an execution partner. Unless you have a very long legacy with the brand, you are actually executing on behalf of the communications head or the marketing head. So all you can do is actually douse some fire, nothing else, unless you have a large history with the brand. I recall one of the incidences, in Policy Bazaar, where a story came out next day that Yashish is joining a brand called Fitso. And was just, some journalist did a shoddy job and kind of misread the statement. Basically, was joining the advisory board. And the next couple of days, we got a lot of press, good press actually. We used the momentum to build a lot of good publicity for us. But in today's day and age, how many agencies are actually integrated? It just can't be solved by a mere media statement or a PR statement. Are you good at actually doing AI narratives? Are you actually a true content marketing agency? So usually you come to a communications person in the age of AI today, a crisis, but actually the role is much more beyond, which can be solved by multiple agencies or a true integrated communications agency.
So need for understanding, unpacking, and adapting is way higher. Building on that, Madhurima, you are in a very interesting position where one thing for sure everybody in this room agrees is AI helps you speed up the process, AI helps you map and look at narratives well. It's said that you need to understand the problem first to be able to solve for it. I think one thing that AI definitely does in a crisis situation is helps you get different perspectives on the table to be able to make sense of it. What do you think is the role of that mapping, research? What insights are you seeing in the global and the Indian scenario that may come in here?
So I work with a global company which is not listed on the Indian stock exchange, but on the French stock exchange. And, for a company of the scale of Ipsos, which is in 90 markets, universally across our markets, we have a crisis playbook. Yes, we do have that. And, we all had to take this very, very tough test where we had to get at least 9 out of 10 marks to, to do that. And where we were taught about, what actions we should take in case there is a crisis. Who should escalate to, what will be our narrative, what will be the job that we do. But beyond that, what I want to say that I myself do so much firefighting on my own without even anyone knowing it. Like sometimes the journalist writes a completely different headline, which is, and the quote misquotes the person's quote completely, and then I have to go and get it changed. And there was, recently there was most of the work that we do, it's all global surveys which cover every market. So where India's image is at stake and where the government, can take action against us. There was a story where we said that, India is among the most optimistic markets, etc. And there was something about how people are very, stoked about getting good increments next year. I was just browsing through because I have access to the social listening tools which my company has provided me, where in real time I can see what kind of narrative is being said. I suddenly saw somewhere in Nepal some godforsaken publication called Arthik Ko Saman. They have written a completely different story. India is the most pessimistic market. Oh my God, and their number did not work. Then I had to quickly write to them and tell them, please pull down this story. This is the press release. So, we do that all the time. But when it comes to, also we have very good guardrails in terms of our IT systems. We have, when the mails come in, very few reach us. All the, no links come to us, etc. And the policies, not everyone can, even the social media, people, what they write on social media, that also there is a guideline on that, what they should be writing and how they should not engage with anything which is, in fact, there was someone who wrote something which I don't want to say about, but then I spotted it and then I told this person who does my social media work what action she should be taking. So, we have to be, our job is 24/7.
Yeah, completely agree with you there, Madhurima, that being prepared for it, preparedness and having something to go by is...
And we also have a social media listening tool
True.
Called Synthesio, where we do this work for clients. All the clients, we tell them what is being said about their brands and then our researchers go through that data and actually tell them what they should be doing with that data. And what action.
Thank you. I'll have to come in here being mindful of just the timelines because we've got a certain amount of time in hand. Coming back to you, Deepa, definitely one thing that we've established is preparedness is necessary. But how far do we trade automation for, authenticity and accountability in a crisis situation like this? Definitely, I think one thing everybody's bringing in is human intelligence is not getting replaced. AI is just setting the tone for you. It's such an opportune time that we are also going to be celebrating 30 under 30, right? And this human intelligence that maybe compositely is there in this room is built on decades of rolling your sleeves up and getting into the muck, clearing it, and fighting it head on in crisis situations. For the younger generation, for whom maybe we are talking about this playbook, who do not have the advantage of these number of experience, of yours, how do they navigate a situation like this? Because maybe, just again, that fast food example, they are eating into AI much faster and they are far more gung-ho about it. So we are at this interesting intersect. And what would you make of it?
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, I would say to everybody who's a youngster coming into this profession, I think common sense precedes everything else. And I think knowledge is another thing that precedes everything else. I mean, even with our agency friends, and I have a brilliant agency, but I keep telling the youngsters who come in that there is no substitute to understanding the business, client's business. Because if you don't understand that, then you're as good as that AI that you're trying to train. Frankly, it's about the intelligent questions that you ask AI.
Because machine is only going to learn as much as you're going to define and feed it.
Exactly. So it is learning from the patterns. It is learning from the LLMs, right? So I think those are two things that are very important. And for the youngsters, I think adaptability is key. See, every crisis is different. No two crises are the same. So, adaptability is key. Secondly, I think digital first approach. Given that today crisis skyrockets into just anything and everything and it is faceless, I think it's very important that, we have a digital first response. And I think the third thing would be definitely scenario planning. I think, simulation-based exercises is something I think all of us need to do, including people like us in communication. What kind of situation can come up tomorrow? None of us can predict, right? So I think these are the three key things I would
Right, and I
definitely
think AI can really help us there for sure. Scenario planning, giving you all that background information and all that nuance there, right? Jasita, I see you ready with some points already, right? I've taken a cue on that.
In the toss-up between automation and human, I look at it as an and not an either or. we will need
Well
both.
said. Well
In a
said.
crisis, you have to sift through reams and reams of madness, and so that velocity will be brought to you by machines. But the credibility element will always be brought in by a human. And ironically, you talk about this fast food example analogy, it's a good one. But ironically, the more synthetic the world is becoming, the more we are craving for human attention and human trust. So having journalists who can speak on record, third-party validations, industry bodies speaking for you, when the crisis is beyond one, these are going to be very, very valuable going forward. And finally, I think AI still cannot read social nuance. AI cannot tell you when it is wiser to stay silent because the tide will turn. AI still can't tell you things like that. So the moral compass of a response is still going to be human.
Which is so wonderfully said. I think one thing that I take away from that is context any day is going to be far more important than the content. If your context isn't tight enough, then content will leak out of it. And that in that context, I think one thing that we may want to touch upon, definitely one thing we know that technology is ahead of regulatory environment and policies and all of that. But Venkatesh, to the point that you were making earlier, that are we even deciphering AI well enough right now? And unless there is a push from maybe the industry bodies, maybe the way the world is moving, maybe there won't be a total adoption of AI in all aspects of communications. What do you have to say to that?
My personal view on that is that at no point in time there can be enough push, enough for us to adopt AI. Because in crisis management, while 75% of the business is about the message, the reach, etc., the 25% is more of the human involvement, the sentiment involvement, the choice to say something or not to say something, the choice to protect your stance despite the odds that happens, the nuances of the particular person you are referring to or you're reaching out to. There may be a history of it, okay? So many things are there. There are so many complexities which will always be part of it. So whatever technology push that we will have to, like the previous speaker had said, we'll have to learn to adapt it as one of our tools, and it is never going to be in this context of crisis management, be something which will drive what agencies should.
Very interesting there. You know, one thing that we are all saying in different ways and packaging it is an and conversation. It is a co-pilot. It is a complementary conversation, and not something that we see as a challenge or really disregard or discredit, right? Having said that, Aman, one thing that I'd want to talk about as well is, in a crisis situation, whenever a leader is put in front of any challenging stakeholder, be it your consumers, be it your employees, be it the media, there is so much layering in the non-said aspect of it. And as we picked up the nuance of silence, or as we train ourselves in terms of non-verbal communication, is there somewhere AI that can come in from a training perspective as well, from an upskilling perspective as well, scenario drawing perspective as well? Let's now look at, change the lens and see what is the advantage that we can ride on with AI. Any thoughts on that?
It has to be human, when there is a crisis. I think those statements, are you empathetic enough? Do you really understand your consumer and talking their language? That becomes very, very critical. Obviously, where you are making those statements, are you making them in a boardroom, or you are actually in the middle of a site? That makes a huge difference, that you are actually there, you are with them. So I think those little things make a difference. Obviously, you can use AI to kind of ask that, can I make it more human? And maybe, it can give you some brilliant responses. But then at the end of the day, you have to choose the best response. It can be AI.
Yeah.
It can be an AI response. It can be, what you believe in. So that lies with you, that decision making. But I would say that it makes a lot of difference where you are making those statements, how you are making those statements, and yeah.
Great. So again, you reiterate the importance of the context and the environment in which you're operating, and therefore the sensitivities. The fact that I was talking about is the amount of hours you spend training versus the war room that you go to, from that panning out perspective. Deepa, you had a point to make to
I
that?
want to say something to what Aman said. You know, we have to help AI to help us. That is the key. Because if you're not going to help AI, and you can do that when it's a downtime at work. That's the time when you create those prompts, you keep things ready, you do those simulation exercises.
The more you sweat in peace, the
more
less you
time
bleed in war, right?
Exactly. And it will happen slowly. Because again, to my earlier point, you're learning from patterns, right? So that's what I wanted to
So
say.
definitely we need to make friends with AI for sure. Jasita, you, and then we'll come to
I
Madhurima.
think just to add to what Deba said, see, we do need to monitor for manipulation now, right? So we have to train the AI and for it to evolve to a stage that it can pick up synthetic content, coordinated behavior, patterns, etc., etc. So I think that's one area that we really need help in. And the second I feel is that messages, therefore, have to be designed not just for people, which is what we've heard so far, but also for platforms. So the same content, how can it be made more shareable so that your verifiable information, the statement that you put out, is optimized for discovery, is optimized for repetition, is optimized for frequency building, because only then will it reach. So I think in all these areas, training is required. First of all, discovery is required, and then training is required.
What that also makes me realize, and maybe, our closing comment could also be on that, is it's not a one man's job. It's not a solo space. It is a very interdepartmental, like cross-functional sort of, from legal to tech to comms to policy to all of them. It's a complex space, and all of us need to join hands together to be able to make the maximum out of it. So building on that, Madhurima, would you, and we'll come to Venkatesh for a point as well. So,
Okay, so I think first of all, you need to build a very strong brand, which stands for all the right values of trust, transparency, because in case of headwinds, then, even your own customers think whether to believe it or not to believe it, in case there is some mischievous content floating, that is. Now, I will just give you one tiny example of what I did for a very large corporation. So they had a very huge crisis. And they came to me because I also have a crisis communication background. So within the company itself, where I work. So what we did, there was this crisis. We went to their key customers. Suppose XYZ are the customers. So we first of all found out from them if they heard of any negative news about them, and if yes, what have they heard? Okay. So we are not telling them that this is what the news is. Say, have you heard of anything? And then those who have heard, then you do a communication. The company did a communication trying to address those issues or whatever they were confronting. Then after that, we gave it a tiny gap, say, and then we did another survey among the same TG, a similar TG, not the same set, to see whether that had disappeared, those who had negative. So that had sort of calmed down because they had explained what went and like that. So I think you have to address it immediately. Then you also have to see the damage, what it has done, and what, through your communication, can you redeem it? Can you come back to your, regain their trust? So all that I have done.
So keeping an ears to the ground and making sure that you're mapping what's happening,
Yes,
and
exactly.
you're adapting your strategy accordingly and
whether
solving
the
for
crisis
it.
has now,
Subdued or not.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Venkatesh, you had a point to make.
Just adding to the crisis room that you talked about, crisis management room. There's a new person you're going to be seeing in the crisis room. That's what has happened. You need that AI watchdog or a cyber expert or a cyber law expert, or even somebody who's actually a prompt engineer expert. I don't know what they would be calling. That one new person has entered the crisis room and is going to play a larger role than the comms person. So the comms person, in a way, becomes the idea giver, and the rest of it will be managed by them. That's one new thing.
Very interesting. Very interesting
And
point.
second thing I have noticed is that, and I'm just stretching my neck out to say that I heard a gentleman speaking at Bangalore, a Meta gentleman, talking about AI replacing jobs. he said one thing which stayed back with me, saying that AI's way of creating jobs is it unbundles activities and then tries to provide solutions. Okay, and the only way humans can continue to be relevant is by bundling their talents. Okay, so if we draw that context to what will happen to AI, there are a lot of processes in which AI may come and still make better solution. Reading languages, reaching far and wide, speed, anything, fake news, identifying fake news, analysis. But at the end of the day, whether I had a previous experience, kind of a nuance, it cannot bring. So I would imagine that in the future, you will have somebody who's like a specific AI developer for each company. Every company will carry its own AI tool, which means it knows the nuances about the company, the history of the company.
Right, and
its
that's
friends.
already happening.
Yeah,
a
so
lot of
that
lot,
will
lot,
be a
yeah,
very
yeah.
important development.
Very interesting that it'll slice, dice, solve for a part of the problem, and maybe the communicator is going to pack it all together and then serve the dish. We've got limited time, but I think we can definitely squeeze in a question or two. So,
Some legal framework within the organization to protect ourselves.
definitely, definitely. If you could give me a raise of hands, and we'll have a mic travel to you in case you have a question. We've got a brilliant panel here, so. Great. I don't see a raise of hands, but if there is, oh, there is one. There are two, in fact. So,
I happen to come from a crisis management background, being such as mountaineer interventions around the world in different verticals. One thing what I would love to say and hear from the erudite panel is that, do we have a navigational flight plan before the contingencies happen? Because as the lady Madhurima said in our organization, that you have contingency plans for every single vertical. But when you use AI, I happen to be the national convener for AI and drones and technology. Do we have those navigational flight plans and the people who have the intuition and the sympathetic ecosystems within themselves and the teams as well, in order to navigate the AI and the teams as well? That's what Venkatesh, I think, he suggested now, is that the incoming teams, the crisis management teams, should have one expert or two rather in
so that's a question that you're asking. That
No,
is there a?
It's a remark, and also I expect the remarks from the panel as well. Thank you.
All right.
So I won't answer this directly, but I'll try and navigate around your question. See, the thing is today, no organization, earlier it used to be, when there would be a crisis, there would be a CEO who would become the face, or there would be one person or one department that would, kind of answer and be the face. Today, what AI has done is every organization, it's become a connected enterprise. Okay? Every department is connected. Everybody needs to have an expert in their department who understands the AI know-how. Because when the crisis strikes an organization, it is not going to be, and maybe I differ slightly, Venki here, that we need to have an expert in every department today. Because what AI has done is, AI has led to a single source of truth in every enterprise, which is the data. So every organization has data which is backing their business. Whether it's a CFO, whether it's a CIO, whether it is the CEO, it's the employees, it's that single source of truth which is the data. So everybody today needs to be, to some extent, a data engineer. Everyone needs to be a prompt engineer. Everyone needs to have that AI know-how. We cannot, sit on our laurels and say that, oh, this is what we are good at. Crisis is not going to be a one-man job or a one-department job, I feel. But
Yeah.
that's my take.
And observing the both perspectives, both Venki's perspective and Deepa's perspective. In fact, what you're saying, Deepa, is fairly complementary to what Venki was saying. With that one expert, he's saying he needs that one expert in the comms room.
Use the word, it will be an addition to the board.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's a function, and what she's building on there is not just in the comms function. Every function today needs this person who has that lens.
And-
There was, yeah.
Sorry, I may be stretching again. I think data-backed crisis management is not all types of crises. When we are talking here, I think we should talk about holistic crisis. the number of crises I handle is with behavior, is with emotion, is with dissatisfaction, is with enmity, is with those kind of stuff. I think their data will always, I'm again not countering, but only complementing, saying that it's going to be a secondary stuff which is going to come in. We may or may not be able to evolve ourselves as those prompt engineers, technology persons, but bringing them along and making them important part of our team is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, so tangibility or non-tangibility is something that we'll still work with. There was one last, our time's up, so let's squeeze in one last question. Let's be mindful of the response timeline.
So thank you so much for this insightful kind of conversation on this. Like what you have said is very much true. I belong to bank. I work for India Post Payments Bank, and there we have a business continuity plans where we have this entire drill about communication in terms of an outages or a failure or any kind of service which is getting affected because of technology or any on-ground presence of staff. My question to you is that, like, I'm repeating it, you just said it. What is that we need to do before crisis? How should we not fret or burn out too much in handling a crisis? And what could be the kind of a groundwork which could already prepare in terms of building a trust that people can, even if we don't speak much, people understand what we're saying.
So like we have, sorry, can I go first? Okay, so like in Ipsos, we have this crisis playbook where we are about 20,000 employees around the world, not in India alone. So we've all undertaken this test, and we've undergone these 3-4 hours of training, workbook reading, and then a test on that. And we had to get 9 out of 10. So there, everyone is aligned on what it is to do in case a crisis should erupt. Like what is the first step, whether it should go to the CEO, then the legal. So everyone is aligned, and nobody is supposed to engage with anybody. It is just the key people who will speak. Otherwise, if 10 people start talking, then you can imagine how crazy it's going to get. So we have those guardrails, and we have those to understand, because we handle a lot of data, and we're also bound by all these ISO 27001s of the world, and ISO, another ISO. So all that we have that. So it's very, very you have to first protect.
Yeah. So
protect yourself, and then and of course have a good, like I said, brand image. Once you have that strong brand image and you have all these guardrails, then that's the first step. And in God forbid, if it happens, then you know what to do.
So on the cost of butting in and being a little slightly impolite, I think preparedness. Do you want to close that? I'll hand it over to you, Jasrita, and you respond and you
I'll
close this.
I think what you're talking about is predictive analytics, and there are predictive analytics today that you can apply for external or internal. For instance, if there is internal, because she spoke about internal stakeholders, and so many of those are disgruntled employees and stuff like that. You can pick up signs with your social listening. You can pick up signs on your internal communication platforms, whether Slack or Yell or Glassdoor, etc., etc. Today, technology, AI, all is helping you to pick up the signs early, the signs which were obscure or were a little not so transparent earlier, and say, now we can see a crisis coming from a mile and be better prepared. On preparedness, then you can have some pre-approved formats or templates by legal, because largely the Pareto's principle applies. 70 to 80% of the crises, it's not a crisis that you haven't seen before. It's only once in a lifetime that you get a COVID. For those 20% of the crises, you have the time and the bandwidth to do it. I think that's it. We're really out of time, and we are all here and we can discuss
Absolutely.
offline.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, and thank you for bearing with us for the extra 3 minutes we took.